Good evening, my dears. My name is Teresa, and at 76 years old, my heart still remembers every detail of the story I'm about to share. I've carried it quietly for many years, but today I feel strong enough to speak it aloud. Maybe it will help someone who is walking through a dark moment of their own. Let me take you back to the year 1965. I was just a 16-year-old girl then, hopeful, shy, and full of dreams. My parents were simple farmers who moved from the countryside to Chicago, believing the city might offer a better life for us. We didn't have much, but we had faith, and sometimes that's enough. It was during those early months in Chicago that I met Arnold. Oh, he was handsome, brown eyes, a strong jaw, and a smile that could make a girl forget her worries. He worked as a truck driver, a respected job back then. Drivers traveled long roads, delivered important goods, and earned enough to take care of a family. To a young girl like me, he seemed steady, dependable. A man I could build a future with. We dated for only 6 months before he asked me to marry him. And like many girls of that time, I said yes with my whole heart. People didn't think too much back then. We believed in love, in promises, in building a home together. My mother warned me, "Teresa, you barely know him," but I was young. And love can make even the loudest warning sound small. Our beginning wasn't glamorous. We lived in a tiny room behind his aunt's house, a kitchen, barely big enough for 2 people, and a bedroom where the walls felt close on cold nights. Arnold traveled often for work, sometimes gone 3-4 days at a time. I told myself it was normal, that he was doing it for us, for the family we dreamed of. 2 years passed quickly. I became a mother, first to Charles Edward, then to Mary Elizabeth, and later to Joseph Andrew. 3 little blessings who filled my days with diapers, bottles, and laughter. While Arnold continued his long routes across states, I stayed home holding our small world together. Back then, I trusted everything he said. I believed every word. I had no idea that our quiet little life was standing on a truth I hadn't discovered yet, a truth that was coming closer with every passing day. But my dear ones, the first sign of the storm arrived, in the most unexpected way, a story I will tell you in part 2. And trust me, it changed everything. As the years passed, life settled into a routine. Arnold came and went with his truck routes, and I learned to raise 3 children mostly on my own. I didn't complain. In those days, a good wife didn't question her husband's work. She simply trusted and waited. It was during our 2nd year of marriage that Arnold first mentioned his sister, Celia. He spoke of her gently, almost sadly. According to him, she lived in Indianapolis and suffered from some serious health problems. Something he never described clearly, something he always kept vague, like a shadow you can see but never touch. Every month, without fail, Arnold would set aside a portion of his salary, money we often desperately needed, and tell me it was for Celia's treatment. "She's all I have left, Teresa," he would say, looking at me with those soft brown eyes. "Our parents are gone. She depends on me. I can't leave her alone." And how could I argue with that? I had been raised to respect family loyalty, so I believed him. I even admired him for it. I thought it was beautiful that he cared so much for his only sister. I didn't know then that admiration can blind you faster than love. There were nights when we barely had enough to cover school supplies or replace worn-out shoes. I remember once Charles Edward needed new sneakers, but the money had already been sent to Celia. Swallowed my sadness and patched his old pair again, telling him they looked just fine. But something always felt strange. In all those years, we never visited Celia, not once. Not on holidays, not for birthdays, not even for Sunday dinners. Whenever I suggested it, Arnold would quickly change the subject. He always had an excuse ready. Her condition was delicate. She didn't like visitors. Her home had to stay controlled because of her illness. "Someday, Teresa," he would say softly. "Someday we'll go, just not now." And I, wanting so much to be a patient, understanding wife, accepted his words without question. Looking back, I can't believe how blind I was. But at that time, I thought silence was the price of harmony. The routine continued like that. His trips, his monthly envelopes, his constant excuses. I convinced myself everything was normal, even though my heart sometimes whispered otherwise. What I didn't know was that the truth was already on its way to my doorstep, wrapped in a small piece of paper that would shake the ground beneath my feet. Because one ordinary afternoon, while preparing his coat for another trip, I found something that changed my life forever. And part 3 will reveal exactly what it was. I still remember that day as clearly as if it happened last week. It was March of 1978, a quiet morning with sunlight slipping through the kitchen window. Arnold was getting ready for another long trip. He said it was to New York this time. Whenever he mentioned New York, the trips were usually longer and the pay supposedly higher. I believed him, as I always did. Like any other travel day, I washed and ironed his shirts, folded his socks, and checked the buttons on his uniform. Caring for his things made me feel useful, connected, as if I were sending a piece of myself with him on the road. Then I picked up his navy blue coat, the one he wore on nearly every long route. As I slipped my hand inside the pocket to check for loose threads, something unexpected brushed against my fingers. A small card. At first I thought it was a receipt, maybe a note from a coworker. But when I pulled it out, my heart skipped a beat. It was a homemade birthday card, decorated with colorful little dots. The kind children make with joy. Curious but calm, I opened it. Happy birthday, my love. May God grant you health and many more years of life. With all our love, Celia and Deborah. My hands began to tremble, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I was reading it correctly. My love? Our love? Father and husband? Who was Deborah? And why was his sick sister writing to him like a wife? Like a woman who shared a home and a child with him? I read the card again and again, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something innocent, something that didn't hurt. But no matter how many times I blinked, the truth stared right back at me. The month before, I had baked a small birthday cake for Arnold. I remembered how he barely touched it, how distant he seemed. I had assumed he was tired. Now I realized he had probably already celebrated, with them. I slipped the card quietly into my apron pocket. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face still. I didn't confront him that day. Something deep inside whispered that if I was to face this storm, I needed more than one clue. I needed the whole truth. Arnold left the next morning, kissing me on the forehead as he always did. But this time, something was different. The kiss felt hollow, and the air between us felt heavier than ever before. Little did I know the next clue would come not from Arnold, but from a phone call that shattered every piece of trust I had left. And I will tell you all about it in part 4. I still remember that day as clearly as if it happened last week. It was March of 1978, a quiet morning with sunlight slipping through the kitchen window. Arnold was getting ready for another long trip. He said it was to New York this time. Whenever he mentioned New York, the trips were usually longer and the pay supposedly higher. I believed him, as I always did. Like any other travel day, I washed and ironed his shirts, folded his socks, and checked the buttons on his uniform. Caring for his things made me feel useful, connected, as if I were sending a piece of myself with him on the road. Then I picked up his navy blue coat, the one he wore on nearly every long route. As I slipped my hand inside the pocket to check for loose threads, something unexpected brushed against my fingers. A small card. At first I thought it was a receipt, maybe a note from a coworker. But when I pulled it out, my heart skipped a beat. It was a homemade birthday card, decorated with colorful little dots. The kind children make with joy. Curious but calm, I opened it. Happy birthday, my love. May God grant you health and many more years of life. With all our love, Celia and Deborah. My hands began to tremble, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I was reading it correctly. My love? Our love? Father and husband? Who was Deborah? And why was his sick sister writing to him like a wife? Like a woman who shared a home and a child with him? I read the card again and again, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something innocent, something that didn't hurt. But no matter how many times I blinked, the truth stared right back at me. The month before, I had baked a small birthday cake for Arnold. I remembered how he barely touched it, how distant he seemed. I had assumed he was tired. Now I realized he had probably already celebrated, with them. I slipped the card quietly into my apron pocket. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face still. I didn't confront him that day. Something deep inside whispered that if I was to face this storm, I needed more than one clue. I needed the whole truth. Arnold left the next morning, kissing me on the forehead as he always did. But this time, something was different. The kiss felt hollow, and the air between us felt heavier than ever before. Little did I know the next clue would come not from Arnold, but from a phone call that shattered every piece of trust I had left. And I will tell you all about it in part 4. After that phone call, The walls of my home felt unfamiliar, almost foreign. Every corner seemed to whisper doubts I had ignored for too long. I tried to carry on for the children's sake, but inside, a quiet storm had begun. A storm that no amount of denial could calm. Arnold wouldn't return until the weekend, and I knew I needed answers before facing him. The birthday card had opened the first door. The trucking company opened another. And now I felt a strange mix of fear and courage guiding me toward the truth. The next morning, while the children were at school, I walked into our bedroom. Arnold's side of the wardrobe always felt like sacred ground, clean, orderly, untouched by anyone but him. But that day, I opened the door without hesitation. I didn't know what exactly I was searching for. I only knew I would recognize it when I saw it. At first, everything looked normal. Shirts folded neatly, his travel bag in the corner, the same smell of engine oil and soap. But then my eyes fell on the bottom drawer. The one he never let me organize. The one he once told me contained old papers and nothing important. My hands trembled slightly, but I pulled the drawer open. Inside were documents, envelopes, and folded papers stacked without any order. I began sorting through them one by one. Receipts, old truck route maps, random notes, nothing unusual. Until I found a small brown envelope tucked beneath a stack of papers. On the front of it, written in Arnold's handwriting, was a single name: Celia. My heart thudded painfully. With a deep breath, I opened it. Inside were several things that made my breath catch. A checkbook from a bank I had never heard of, a few receipts with an Indianapolis address, and a piece of paper with an address neatly written on it. Celia's address. Not a hospital, not a clinic, not a place where a sick sister might live. It was a home, a normal neighborhood home. My hands trembled as I copied the address onto a small slip of paper. I didn't know what I would find there, but something inside me whispered that the truth was waiting for me behind that door. I folded the slip and hid it behind the wedding photo on our wall, right next to the image of us promising each other forever. The irony wasn't lost on me, and so began the journey I never expected to take, one that would lead me all the way to Indianapolis, and straight into the heart of a truth that would change my life. Part 6 will tell you how that journey began. Those next few days felt like walking through a fog. I cooked, cleaned, and tucked the children into bed every night, but inside my mind, one thought circled over and over like a whisper I couldn't silence. Who is Celia, really? I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that birthday card, those handwritten words, that Indianapolis address hidden in Arnold's drawer. My heart kept urging me toward the truth, even though part of me feared what I might find. Arnold left again 2 weeks later for what he claimed was another long New York trip. His usual forehead kiss felt colder than ever. As soon as he walked out the door, something inside me shifted. A quiet strength rose in me. I realized I couldn't live another day drowning in questions. I had to go find the answers myself. That Friday morning, after sending the children off to school, I walked next door to my friend Louise's house. She had known me since we moved to Chicago, gentle, kind, and always ready to help. "Louise," I said softly, "I need to go to Indianapolis, just for a day. Can you watch the children until tomorrow evening?" She studied my face, reading the fear behind my forced smile. "Of course, Teresa," she said quietly. She didn't ask questions. Good friends understand the silence. I went back home and pulled out the small tin of hot chocolate from the back of the cupboard, the place where I hid my savings. A few crumpled bills, some coins, just enough for a round-trip bus fare and a small emergency. It wasn't much, but God often stretches what little we have. I placed the birthday card in my purse. It was my only proof, my only courage. I put on my best dress, light blue with tiny flowers I had stitched myself, combed my hair neatly, and dabbed a bit of lipstick. I don't know why, but something in me wanted to face the truth looking strong, not broken. At the bus station, my heart pounded with every step. The ride to Indianapolis was only a few hours, but to me it felt like a lifetime. The fields blurred past the window, and every mile felt like a step deeper into a story I had never agreed to be part of. When the bus finally stopped, I took a deep breath, clutching the slip of paper with Celia's address. Whatever waited for me on the other side of that door, I was ready. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what I saw when I reached her house. In Part 7, I'll tell you about the moment that changed everything. The bus dropped me off in a part of Indianapolis I had never seen before. The streets were quiet, lined with tidy houses and neat gardens. It didn't look like the home of someone who was too sick for visitors. It looked like the kind of place where people lived peaceful, ordinary lives. My heartbeat grew louder with every step I took. I checked the slip of paper again, Celia's address. The numbers matched. The street matched. Everything was real. The house was painted a soft yellow with a little garden in front. Roses, daisies, and even a small wooden bench. Nothing about it whispered sickness or struggle. If anything, it looked warm, cared for. With trembling fingers, I opened the small gate and walked toward the door of a shop built into the side of the house. A wooden sign hung above it. Celia's Atelier, custom clothing. My breath caught. A shop? A business? The sick sister had a business? I stepped inside, and the scent of fresh fabric and lavender greeted me. The place was beautiful. Colorful rolls of cloth neatly arranged, sewing mannequins dressed in elegant designs, everything organized and spotless. My heart sank. How could someone supposedly ill run a shop like this? Suddenly, a young girl appeared from the back room. She looked around 14, with long brown hair braided neatly over her shoulder. But it wasn't her hair that made my breath stop. It was her eyes. Those warm brown eyes, the shape, the softness, were the same eyes I saw every morning on my son Charles Edward. The same eyes Arnold had looked at me with when he proposed. The resemblance was so striking, it felt like being struck by lightning. "Good morning, ma'am," the girl said sweetly. "Can I help you?" I stood frozen. Words refused to come out. I stared at her face, the familiar curve of her nose, the slight tilt of her smile. She wasn't Arnold's niece. She wasn't a neighbor's child. In that moment, without anyone telling me, I knew. She was his daughter. I'm looking for Celia," I finally managed to whisper. "My mom stepped out to buy materials," she said. "But my dad is home. Would you like to speak with him?" My heart nearly stopped. Her dad, her father, the man who should have been hundreds of miles away driving a truck to New York. "Yes," I whispered. "I'd like to speak with him." She smiled and called out, "Dad, there's a customer here." Footsteps approached. And there he was. Arnold stood in the doorway, my husband, staring at me as if he'd seen a ghost. In Part 8, I'll tell you exactly what happened in that room, when the truth could no longer hide. For a moment, time didn't move. Arnold stood there in the doorway, frozen, his face drained of every bit of color. His eyes widened the moment he saw me, as if he were staring at a spirit he hoped would never come. "Teresa," he whispered, barely audible. The young girl, his daughter, though she didn't know it yet, looked back and forth between us, her eyebrows knitting in confusion. "Dad, you know her?" Before Arnold could respond, the front door opened. A woman walked in carrying rolls of fabric in her arms. She was beautifully dressed, elegant, and confident. Everything I was not in that moment. Her hair was neatly styled, and she wore a shade of red lipstick I had never dared to try. She stopped mid-step when she saw me standing there. "Oh, I didn't realize we had a customer," she said politely, smiling. But the smile slowly faded when she noticed Arnold's expression. Something flickered in her eyes, an instinct that something wasn't right. "Celia," Arnold finally managed to say, his voice strained. "This is Teresa." Her face shifted from confusion to shock, then horror. She dropped the fabric bags onto the floor, the sound echoing through the room. The young girl, still unaware of the storm unfolding, stepped closer to her parents. "Mom, Dad, what's happening? Who is she?" I reached into my purse with trembling hands and pulled out the birthday card. The same card that had led me here. Quietly, I held it out for Celia to see. Her eyes filled with tears the moment she recognized the handwriting. Then she looked at Arnold, really looked at him, and the truth settled heavy on all of us. I turned to the girl who seemed so lost, so frightened. My name is Teresa, I said softly. I've been married to your father for 13 years, and I have 3 children. The young girl's face crumpled. She stared at Arnold, waiting, begging for him to deny it. But he didn't. He couldn't. His silence spoke louder than any confession. Dad, is this true? She asked, voice trembling. Arnold dragged a hand over his face, a gesture I'd seen many times when he was cornered. Deborah, I can explain. Explain what? Celia snapped through her tears. That you've been living a double life? Her voice cracked, anger mixing with heartbreak. I sank into a nearby chair. My legs simply wouldn't hold me anymore. Everywhere I looked, I saw pieces of a life I was never meant to know. Pictures of them together. Family outings, birthdays, smiles stolen from me and my children. This wasn't just betrayal. It was an entire world built behind my back. But the most painful part wasn't the lies. It was the moment. Deborah asked a question that broke all our hearts. I'll tell you that moment in part 9. The room felt unbearably quiet, as if even the air was waiting to hear what would happen next. Arnold stood there, caught between 2 families, 2 worlds, and 2 women who never should have shared the same roof. Celia wiped her tears with shaking hands, and little Deborah. Oh dear, sweet Deborah. She looked like a child watching her whole life tilt sideways. She stepped toward her father, her voice fragile. Dad, is she really telling the truth? Do I have brothers and a sister? Her question sliced through me sharper than any knife. It wasn't asked in anger, but in heartbreak, a heartbreak too heavy for a young girl to carry. Arnold opened his mouth, but no words came out. So I answered for him. Yes, sweetheart, I said gently, forcing myself to meet her eyes. You have 3 siblings, Charles Edward, Mary Elizabeth, and Joseph Andrew. My voice cracked. But I fought to keep it steady. They don't know about you, just like you never knew about them. Deborah's lips trembled. Why didn't he tell me? Celia let out a painful sob, pressing a hand to her mouth. Because he lied to both of us, she whispered, looking at her daughter with deep sorrow. He told me he was a widower when I met him. He said he couldn't marry me because of some paperwork. I believed him, Teresa. I swear I did. Her pain didn't feel like the pain of a rival. It felt like the pain of another woman betrayed just as deeply. Arnold finally spoke, his voice rough and desperate. I didn't want to hurt any of you. I love both families. Hearing that made something inside me burn. I stood up slowly, gripping the back of the chair to steady myself. You didn't want to hurt anyone? I said softly. Too softly. Arnold, every time you kissed our children goodbye and said, you were driving across the country, you were here. Every birthday you missed, every Christmas you didn't show up, you were here celebrating with them. Celia's face twisted with disbelief. He told me he was working extra hours to support you, Teresa. He made me feel guilty when I complained. Deborah looked at both of us, her eyes swimming with tears. So all these years, we were just half of his life? None of us deserved this, I replied, my heart aching for her. Not you, not my children, not even Celia. Arnold tried to step forward, but I raised my hand. Don't, I whispered. You've said enough? The room felt heavy with truths that could never be taken back. And yet, more was still waiting to be uncovered. Because in that moment, when I thought the pain had reached its peak, another revelation surfaced. One that shook the entire room. Part 10 will tell you exactly what it was. The room was thick with pain, raw, trembling, undeniable. Arnold stood there like a man whose lies had finally run out of places to hide. Celia held onto a mannequin for balance, her elegant appearance now shadowed by heartbreak. And Deborah, dear child, she looked at all of us with eyes that begged for answers she should never have needed. I didn't think things could hurt any more than they already did. But fate had one more blow waiting. Celia turned toward me, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Teresa, do you have children? You mentioned 3. For a moment I hesitated, not because I wanted to hide anything, but because the truth came with another secret I hadn't shared with anyone yet. My hand instinctively drifted toward my belly. Yes, I said quietly. 3 children, and my voice shook. I'm expecting our 4th. The silence that followed was different, deeper, heavier. Deborah gasped softly, her small hands covering her mouth. Celia stared at me, stunned, her tears falling again, but this time with a new ache. And Arnold? He looked as if the ground had disappeared beneath him. What? He whispered, his eyes wide with shock. Teresa, you're Pregnant? I nodded. A wave of emotions rippled through the room. Pain, guilt, disbelief. Everyone seemed to feel the weight of that one truth. You didn't even know, I continued quietly. I only found out last week. I had planned to tell you when you came home. I shook my head. But home wasn't where you were going, was it? Celia pressed a hand to her chest. He told me he could never remarry because of the pension from his late wife, she said bitterly. He lied to me too, all these years. He made me believe he was alone. My father lied to both of us? Deborah whispered, looking between her mother and me. Her young heart was breaking right before our eyes. I swallowed hard, forcing myself not to cry. Deborah, sweetheart, none of this is your fault. Arnold stepped forward, his voice cracking. Teresa, please, let's talk about this. We can fix it. I never meant for— Don't, I said firmly. Nothing you say can undo this. Celia turned away, tears falling onto the fabric rolls at her feet. I gave you everything, she whispered. And you gave us nothing but lies. The room felt too small, too full of memories that didn't belong to me. I suddenly felt the urge to breathe, to escape, to stand somewhere my heart wasn't being torn in two. But I stayed, not for Arnold, for the truth. Because what happened next, the argument, the confessions, the words none of us were ready to hear, changed the direction of all our lives. Part 11 will reveal every painful detail. The silence in that little atelier felt like thunder. Even the air seemed frightened to move. Arnold stood between us, two women whose hearts he had stitched, together with lies and a daughter, who suddenly realized her world had been built on sand. Finally, Celia lifted her chin, her voice trembling but firm. Arnold, tell us the truth. All of it, right now. He rubbed his forehead, pacing like a man trapped in a corner. I never wanted it to be this way, he muttered. When I met you, Celia, You told me you were a widower, she snapped. You said you couldn't marry me because of paperwork tied to your late wife. You made me feel guilty for wanting more. Arnold looked down at the floor, ashamed. I was scared. I didn't know how to tell you about Teresa. Or the children. And what about me? I asked quietly, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. When did the lies begin? He swallowed hard. Before we married. That sentence felt like a blade slicing through 13 years of my life. Before? I repeated, barely breathing. So you were already with Celia? He nodded slowly. She got pregnant first. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't want to lose you, Teresa. I thought I could support both families. Support? I interrupted. You think money makes a family? You missed first steps, birthdays, school plays. You missed everything. For both families. Deborah wiped her tears angrily. Why didn't you just tell the truth? For the same reason cowards hide behind shadows, Celia answered bitterly. Because lies feel easier until they collapse. Arnold looked helpless. I loved both of you. No, I said softly. Love doesn't divide itself in secret rooms. Love doesn't build two homes on borrowed time. Celia hugged Deborah tightly, tears streaming down her face. I felt no jealousy, only a heartbreaking kinship. We were strangers, yet our pain was the same. Two mothers raising children in good faith, never knowing we were sharing a man who belonged fully to neither of us. Arnold reached toward me, desperate. Teresa, please, let's fix this somehow. There is no fix, Arnold, I whispered. Only consequences. He stepped back as if my words had struck him. Celia finally spoke, her voice quiet but final. I want you out of this house, today. And when you come back to Chicago, I added, you will pack your things and leave mine too. Arnold stared at us both, realizing that in a single afternoon, the worlds he juggled had fallen from his hands. He had lost everything. But my journey was far from over. Because after that confrontation, I still had to face the most painful part, returning home and telling my children the truth. Part 12 will reveal how I found the courage to do it. Leaving that house in Indianapolis felt like walking. Out of my old life and into a new one I had never asked for. The sunlight outside felt too bright, almost disrespectful for the kind of pain sitting inside my chest. I held my purse close, not because it had anything valuable, but because I needed something, anything to steady myself. The bus ride back to Chicago felt endless. The scenery outside the window blurred into colors I couldn't name. Every mile was heavy. Every breath felt borrowed. I tried to keep myself together. But the moment the bus pulled away from the station, the tears came, quiet at first. Then steady streams I couldn't stop. I turned my face toward the window. hoping strangers wouldn't see a grown woman breaking apart like a child. My thoughts kept circling back to my children. How would I tell them? How would I explain that the father they loved had been loving another family too? How do you take innocence out of a child's heart without crushing everything else inside them? By the time I reached Chicago, night had already settled in. I walked to Louise's house to pick up the children, trying to compose myself. She took one look at me and her face softened with worry. "Teresa," she whispered, pulling me into a quick embrace. "Whatever it is, you don't have to say it now." I nodded, grateful for her kindness. The children were sitting in her living room, sleepy but cheerful. When they saw me, they ran toward me with hugs and little stories about their day. Stories I tried to listen to, even though my heart felt scattered in pieces back in Indianapolis. We walked home quietly. Once inside, I tucked them into bed one by one. Charles Edward stared at me a little too closely. He always sensed things before others did. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked softly. I brushed his hair gently. "I'm just tired, my love. Get some sleep." But sleep didn't come for me. I sat in the dark living room for hours, the old clock ticking loudly on the wall. The house felt painfully quiet without Arnold. For years, I had waited for him to return from trips. But that night, the silence felt like a truth settling into the bones of our home. By morning, one thing was clear. I couldn't keep the truth from my children. They deserved honesty, no matter how painful. They deserved a life built on truth, even if that truth broke our old life apart. And so, with trembling hands and a trembling heart, I gathered my children to finally tell them everything. Part 13 will reveal the moment that shattered their world and how we found strength in the middle of it. Morning arrived far too quickly. I had barely slept, just drifted in and out of heavy thoughts until the sun finally crept through the curtains. The children were getting ready for school, unaware that their lives were about to change as much as mine had. I watched them quietly as they ate their breakfast. Charles Edward, serious and observant. Mary Elizabeth, gentle and quiet. Little Joseph, full of restless energy. They were innocent, so innocent. And I hated that the truth was about to take something precious from them. "Kids," I said softly, "sit with me for a moment. Mama needs to talk to you." They exchanged confused looks but gathered around the small kitchen table. My hands trembled under the table, so I folded them tightly together. "I went on a trip yesterday," I began. "I went to Indianapolis to find out something very important." Charles leaned forward. "Is it about Dad?" My breath hitched. Children always know more than we think. "Yes," I whispered. "It's about your father." Silence fell over the room. Even Joseph, who could barely sit still on normal days, stayed quiet. I took a deep breath. "Your father hasn't been completely honest with us. He wasn't going to New York for work, at least not every time he said he was." Mary's eyes filled with worry. "Then, where was he?" I forced myself to meet their eyes. "He was living another life, with another family, a woman named Celia, and a little girl named Deborah." The words felt like breaking glass in my mouth. Joseph's eyes widened. Mary covered her mouth with her small hands. Charles sat back in his chair, jaw tight, trying to process more than any 13-year-old should ever have to. "So Dad," Charles began slowly, "Dad has another family besides us?" "Yes," I said softly. "For many years." Tears fell down Mary's cheeks, quiet and steady. Joseph shook his head, whispering, "No, no," as if saying it might make it untrue. Charles stared at the table, fists clenched, breathing hard. I wanted to hold all their pain in my hands, shield them somehow, but I couldn't. All I could do was wrap my arms around them as they cried into my shoulders. "It wasn't your fault," I kept saying. "None of this is your fault." But the truth had settled, whether we were ready or not. And when they finally calmed down, Charles looked at me with eyes far older than his years. "What happens now, Mom?" That question, even I didn't have the answer. Because what happened next, that same week, pushed us into a new chapter when Arnold made a choice none of us expected. Part 14 will reveal how everything changed again. After that painful conversation with my children, the house felt different, quieter, heavier, as if even the walls knew the truth now. For 3 days, we waited for Arnold to return, because he had promised he'd be back Sunday. But Sunday came and went. Monday passed. Tuesday arrived. No footsteps on the porch. No familiar knock on the door. No "I'm home" echoing through the hallway. Instead, on Tuesday afternoon, while I was folding laundry with numb hands, the phone rang. "Mrs. Teresa?" "Yes?" This is Star Road Trucking Company. My heart dropped. We wanted to let you know. Your husband did not return to work. In fact, he came in yesterday morning only to leave a resignation letter. He said he wouldn't be driving for us anymore. I gripped the phone tightly. A resignation letter? He didn't tell me anything. I'm sorry, ma'am. He didn't give any explanation. He left quickly and hasn't returned. I thanked the man mechanically and hung up the phone. Arnold had quit the one thing he always said he'd never give up. He had vanished, just like that. Not just from my life, but from Celia's as well. Because that same evening, I received a trembling phone call from her. "Teresa, he's gone," she whispered. He left us too. No note. No message, nothing. 2 women, 2 homes, 2 families, and he walked away from all of us. For a moment, I didn't feel anger or betrayal. Just a strange, hollow ache. The man who had broken so many promises couldn't even face the consequences of his actions. Instead, he chose to run. In the days that followed, reality hit us hard. Money grew tight quickly. I had 3 children to feed and another on the way. And Arnold left us with nothing, except unpaid bills and an empty space, where a husband used to be. But life doesn't give us time to sit and drown, especially not for a mother. So I pulled out my old sewing machine, the same one I had learned on as a little girl. I started offering small repair jobs to neighbors, hemming pants, fixing zippers, mending torn shirts. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. Little by little, people started coming back with more work. Word spread that I sewed neatly, honestly, and at a fair price. My tiny living room slowly began turning into an improvised workshop. And in that struggle, in that exhaustion, something quietly sparked inside me, a strength I didn't know I had. Arnold may have disappeared, but I was still here, and my children still had me, but fate wasn't done surprising me yet. Because soon, a phone call from Celia would lead to something none of us could have imagined. Part 15 will reveal the moment our 2 families crossed paths again. The months after Arnold vanished were some of the hardest of my life. I sewed day and night, sometimes until my fingers throbbed and my eyes blurred. But every stitch kept food on the table. Every hem, every repaired shirt, every button sewn. It all kept my children's world from completely falling apart. Still, even with the extra work, money was tight. I stretched every dollar like dough, praying it would be enough. I told the neighbors that Arnold had found better work in another state. Because in those days, telling the truth that your husband left you was an invitation for pity and judgment. I wasn't ready for either. One quiet afternoon, when baby Beatrice was only a few weeks old, the phone rang. I wiped my hands on my apron and answered. "Teresa?" I recognized the voice immediately. Celia. My heart tightened. Too many memories sat behind her name. I expected anger, blame, maybe accusations. But what I heard was something else entirely. "Did Arnold come back?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No," I said softly. "He left his job and disappeared." A long silence followed, filled with shared pain. Then she whispered, "He left us too." I closed my eyes. Somehow, knowing she was abandoned as well didn't make my suffering smaller, but it made it less lonely. "How are you managing?" I asked gently. "We're surviving," she replied. "The shop is still open, but bills are piling up. Deborah tries to help, but she's just a girl." Her voice cracked. "I don't know how much longer I can keep it going." My heart softened. Betrayal had made us strangers, but survival made us sisters. "Celia," I said after a long pause, "if you ever need work, I know a fabric store owner here in Chicago. She's looking for someone who knows textiles. Are you offering to help me?" she whispered. "Yes," I said simply. "Not for Arnold's sake, for yours, and for Deborah." She began to cry softly, not the angry kind, but the tired kind that comes when life has pushed you too far. 2 weeks later, Celia and Deborah arrived in Chicago. They carried only a few bags and a whole lot of heartbreak. I found them a room to rent in Louise's house. My old friend welcomed them kindly. Deborah entered the same school as my children. At first there was distance, confusion, even a little resentment. But children have hearts that heal faster than adults. Slowly they began talking, helping each other with homework, sitting together at lunch. And strangely, something unexpected began to grow between our families. Something delicate, fragile, but real. What happened next changed the course of all our lives forever. Because soon, the very pain that broke us became the foundation of something beautiful. Part 16 will reveal the beginning of our new life. Celia and Deborah settled into Chicago slowly, like flowers learning how to grow again after a long winter. Louise welcomed them with open arms. And for the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't fighting this battle alone. Life had shaken us both so hard, and yet somehow, here we were, side by side. I introduced Celia to Mrs. Wilson, the owner of the small fabric shop where I often bought materials. The moment Mrs. Wilson saw how naturally Celia handled fabrics, checking textures, identifying blends, recognizing quality, her eyes lit up. "I've been needing someone like you for years," she said warmly. And just like that, Celia was hired. Meanwhile, Deborah entered the same school as my children. At first, everything was awkward, whispers, curious looks, and questions that children weren't sure how to ask. Deborah was shy and Charles was cautious. Mary Elizabeth was gentle with her, while Joseph couldn't quite understand how someone could be a sister and a stranger at the same time. But day by day, something began to soften between them. Homework shared at the same table, stories exchanged during lunch breaks, small smiles where silence used to be. Children don't carry the same bitterness adults do. They simply look for kindness. And once they find it, their hearts make room. As the weeks passed, Celia and I found ourselves working together more often. She helped me with threading, cutting patterns, and managing customers. I discovered she had a gift, not only with fabrics, but with people. She could talk to anyone, understand their needs, and guide them toward designs that made them feel beautiful. One evening, after a long day of work, Celia and I sat together over cups of tea. The house was quiet, our children tucked into bed, finally comfortable in their new routines. "Teresa," she said softly, looking down at her cup, "I never imagined we'd end up here. Together, helping each other." "Life has strange ways," I replied gently. "Arnold hurt both of us, but maybe God brought us together for a reason." Celia looked at me with teary eyes, not of sadness this time, but of gratitude. "I don't think I would have survived without your help." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "We rise together," I said. "That's what women do." Something powerful formed between us that night, not friendship born from comfort, but from survival, courage, and shared wounds. And from that bond, a seed of a new dream began to grow. Because soon an idea would take shape, one that would turn our pain into purpose and change our futures forever. Part 17 will reveal how our little sewing room transformed into something much bigger. As the weeks settled into months, life slowly found a new rhythm. My little living room, once crowded with children's toys and laundry baskets, had become a small sewing haven. Fabric rolls stacked neatly in corners, thread spools lined up like colorful soldiers, and the steady hum of my old sewing machine filled the house with purpose. But now I wasn't sewing alone. Celia worked beside me, almost every evening after her shifts at Mrs. Wilson's store. She had a way of turning even the simplest fabric into something lovely. Her hands moved with confidence, as if sewing was her second language. And Deborah would sit with my children doing homework, laughter slowly replacing the awkwardness that once hovered between them. One evening, as Celia and I were packing away fabrics, Mrs. Wilson stopped by unexpectedly. She looked around, smiling at the sight of our little workshop. "Teresa," she said with a warm spark in her eyes, "I've been thinking of expanding my store. I want to add a dressmaking corner, something special, but I can't run it alone. I need someone with skill, taste, and a heart for people." She glanced between Celia and me. "You two," she continued, "have something rare. You create with meaning. Every stitch feels like a story." I exchanged a surprised look with Celia. "Are you saying—" I began. "I want to offer you a partnership," Mrs. Wilson said. "Both of you. You'll handle the sewing and design, and I'll handle the business side. Together we can build something wonderful." My breath caught. A partnership? Me? A simple woman who had once cried over not having enough money for school shoes? And Celia, who had lost so much and rebuilt from scraps. Celia's eyes filled with gentle tears. "Mrs. Wilson, this is more than kindness. This is a blessing. We've all walked through storms," the older woman replied softly. "But storms make us stronger and wiser. I believe in you." After she left, Celia and I sat silently for a moment, overwhelmed by possibilities. The kind of possibilities women like us rarely dared to dream about. "Teresa," Celia whispered, "can we really do this? Build something of our own?" I smiled, placing my hand over hers. We've already built strength out of heartbreak. A shop will be the easy part. And just like that, a seed of a future, a real future, began to bloom. Not built on lies or betrayal, but on courage, honesty, and two women who refused to stay broken. But the real miracle wasn't the offer. It was what happened next. When Celia and I finally decided to take the biggest risk of our lives. Part 18 will tell you how our dream officially took flight.